Welcome to the most important week of the year for the podcast industry. Welcome to Podcast Movement 2025.
Hola, bienvenidos, bem-vindos, bienvenue a Beyond the Algorithm. Welcome to Beyond the Algorithm, how multilingual content creates deeper impact and finds market gaps and attract clients. Before we get into today's presentation, I would like to see a quick show of hands. Who here has already consumed content or consumes content in a different language other than your native language? Watched, listened. Out of curiosity, anybody here already creating content in multiple languages or thinking about it? All right. So regardless of whether you are already creating multilingual content or you're thinking about it, whether you speak multiple languages or you speak one language, and you really want to tap into the multilingual content and market, today's session is really about where we're going to be talking about how changing languages, embracing culture, and telling stories in new ways has helped us grow our audience, connect deeper, and land better brand partnerships. And we're also going to be sharing some practical tips that can help you to use to reach and engage multilingual, multicultural audiences. My name is Yesenia Bocanegra. I'm a video podcast content strategist and producer, and I'm the founder of Focus and Bloom Studios, a multilingual podcast strategy and production agency in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm also the host of the Focus and Bloom podcast and Creative Made, where I talk about mindful content creation, entrepreneurship, and podcasting. And because 2 podcasts is not enough, I decided to do a third one in Spanish to talk about the same thing, video podcasting.
Hi, everyone. I'm Xavier. I'm the founder of the Podcast Space. And unlike Yesenia, I only have one. My show is the Podcast Space and is in English. And so I work primarily with women, multilinguals, and impact-driven entrepreneurs who really want to create content that changes their community and grows their business. I have clients all over the world, and so many things that we're going to be talking about is not only how we achieve that, but how can you achieve that too? We're going to share a lot of practical tips, whether you speak another language or not. So definitely take notes. I'm gonna go and straight away talk about why multilingual content actually matters. You may be looking in this graph and going, wow, 130 million monthly podcast listeners alone in the US. I do not need to tap into another market. Well, but when we're looking into China and then basically Latin America, so Brazil and Mexico, we see that there's a lot of potential of markets that we can tap. And we know that podcast audiences only continue to grow. And so many of you already said that you already consume content in different languages. So why not tap into this market? So definitely we're going to be talking about that. But we need to go back into the why. As you know, if you're a podcaster, you already know that having a strong why is super important. But we're breaking this down into the data and personal reasons. The data is simply market needs. Do you already see through your business or whatever it is, conversations with your listeners, that the market does not have what you can offer in the language you normally speak, right? That's great. But also your analytics. I'm a podcast strategist, and I love looking at data to help us inform the decisions that we make with our audiences. And so looking at your podcast analytics, looking at your website, looking at at where people are coming from, your demographics is so, so important. But then we have the personal reasons, which is ours, and maybe yours too. There's a huge shift in really embracing your culture and tapping into new markets and just looking at your identity. And so if you have cultural connection to another language, it makes sense. Whether you speak it or you have maybe family or distant family that does it, it makes a lot of sense to tap into that. Or it can be a business decision. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a second, but it can be a great opportunity to expand your reach and grow your business by tapping into these markets, because we know we're in the US, these is where the decisions are made. And so we can definitely lead lead our audiences moving into another one. So we're going to talk about our insights. It's going to be a combination of our experience, but also what we see. So I am a multilingual podcast strategist. I'm originally from Portugal, and a part of my strategy, my why in founding the podcast space was really understanding that I was looking at a lot of bilingual content, but not really multilingual content. And so I speak Spanish, French a little bit. My husband's French, and there's a connection there. And so I already feel drawn to the content creation in multiple languages. It's important to understand as well that the more you look into yourself, you sometimes feel a little insecure, right? So for me, my journey was I left Portugal at 22. I moved to the UK. And to me, English not being my first language, you're like, what are you talking about right now? But it's true. At the time, I felt really insecure. But as I launched the podcast space in 2020, I realized that that was kind of my superpower. I did not see anyone talking about this. And I was like, well, multilingual as a whole, if you are a content creator, whether you're a podcaster, but a peer as well, you may find yourself, don't want to take space. And so it is really important to look at, again, what are you finding yourself? I work with a lot of women who are struggling to take space because they say, well, maybe my English is not perfect. Maybe my grammar this, my grammar that. And it's really important to say, okay, what can we improve, but what can we do? So I want to talk a little bit about how I'm a big fan of going through the lower to medium effort and not kind of creating a lot of things that don't need to happen right away. So for me, I don't have the capacity to create two different podcasts. As we know, it's a lot of work to grow an audience. And so for me, it made sense to guest on podcasts, to tap into my social media. My company was founded in 2020. I only launched my English-speaking podcast in 2023. That's a huge gap. So what I did was looking into my website, my newsletter, and my social media as a way to convey that. Even though I do talk about my experience on the show every single day, I talk about these things on my online presence. So on my website, I have a little footer that says, we support clients in English, Spanish, Portuguese, and French. And so that allows me for a client or a podcaster who lands on the website to make that decision right away without me even having to say it. Another great way to do it is on your newsletter. So my newsletter has that same information on the footer, and I'm a really big fan of kind of like passive marketing strategies. Again, that's a great way to tell your audience, this is what I do. If you resonate, you can do it. And I have a very special, a little detail that through the years, I was like, oh, this is fun. On my newsletter, I have a PS, and my PS says, hey, this email is written by a multilingual, so it may include some grammar mix-ups, whatever emoji. So that in itself allowed me to actually not only land a few clients, but have a lot of conversations on social media exactly because I am owning it. Hey, I use ChatGPT, but it may happen. And this is actually how we met. So Yesenia was my subscriber, and then I was talking about the fact that, hey, I'm coming back from Portugal. This is the kind of content strategy that I was using this summer. And then she replied, what did you say?
I figured, well, you were sharing that you just came back from Portugal. And I'm like, Portugal is next to Spain. Does she speak Spanish? So I went ahead and DM'd her and said, hey, by any chance, do you speak Spanish? I'm looking for somebody to help me audit my Spanish podcast. She's like, sí. And then here we are.
Right? It can be as simple as this. And again, we think that we're saying these things all the time. But how many newsletters did you read? How many DMs or kind of my stories did you check until that moment when the pain point was there? She was like, oh, I'm ready to talk. Right?
I checked all the things, like your email, your stories, everything.
All the things. So it's important to not just assume that I said it once, it's enough, right? Other things that we can do is guest on people's podcasts. Again, I do a lot of outreach to peers, a lot of outreach to people. If they follow me, I go, hey, you're Portuguese? Oh my gosh, tell me more. And that is through guesting on a podcast with a platform called Popcasts in Portugal, which is basically the podcasting arm of one of the biggest media groups in Portugal. They invited me to create a segment for their podcast. So for 10 episodes, for every week, they basically were sharing to their huge audience my 3-minute insights because I am based in the US. And it was so simple. I recorded, off we go, and then I led them to my podcast. I know Portuguese podcast audiences do have English knowledge, so it is a crossover that is super simple to do. And then one very cool random thing that I will always say and cherish, and I think this is super cool, is really keeping things in the long term. So you never know who is watching, and people say this all the time. So cool things that happen are, for instance, I was a speaker at eCam's Leap into Podcasting in 2022, and I did mention in passing that I was Portuguese. Well, 2 years later, someone that attended that same webinar reach out to me and say, hey, Anna, I'm Brazilian. I just started my live stream journey. I would love to have you on the show. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so great. Sure, let's do it. And then within a couple of months, somebody else reached out and said, hey, I'm a Brazilian in Japan, and I have a small Brazilian in Japan community. We're having these podcast kind of like week-long programming designed for just the Brazilian podcasters based in Japan, and I would love if you could close the festivities. I mean, yes. So you really never know kind of like the cascading effect that something can take. Partnerships with brands. For instance, my husband, as I mentioned, he is French. So many of you have seen Osha over here. I pitched them. I was like, hey, I would love to do a session with you guys. I do speak French. It's kind of like a 5-year-old would sound like. So I was like, you know what? Let's just do it in English. And then I was like, but I do know someone who can do it in French. And that's how.
And that's how we started the collaboration with Osha. So I introduced us, and I said, hey, I can do this presentation in English, but are you looking at having it in French? And they said, oh, you can even do it in French? Yes, oui. Okay, let's do it. And that's what we did. So it was just, these are some examples of how we can, or you can really get into the multilingual, multicultural markets. And in my case, my why is really a mix of both. So I'm from Puerto Rico. I was born and raised speaking Spanish and English. My dad was from New York, so it was always speaking in both languages. It wasn't until college that I later studied French and Italian. So my journey in content creation started in 2014 when I was a fashion photographer and I was creating YouTube videos about how to do fashion shoots. And I'm like, this is so fun. And I said, well, I see other photographers doing it. I want to do that. And then I speak Spanish. Well, let me do that, because I didn't know about the whole strategy and everything. And I started creating this content in English. And I said, well, I speak Spanish. Let me dub it. I was doing everything by myself, no strategy, just creating content for the sake of it. And, well, that kind of led to a little bit of burnout. I also got a little bit bored with my own content because I was dubbing it all myself. So, huge gap. Fast forward to 2020, I discovered this cool thing called podcasting. And then from there, I started to figuring out ways in which I wanted to resume the educational portion of my business. I started my podcast, my first one, Focus and Bloom. I was in the middle of a pivot. Also, something else happened in 2020. I can't remember. And then later, I said I really wanted to go back into creating content in Spanish. I knew that I did not want to get bored out of my mind with my own content. I knew that I did not want to dub it. I wanted to create original content in Spanish and in English. So I started testing out. And what did I do? In 2022, I decided to do a small season or small series for Focus and Bloom podcast in Espanol. I could not think of a new name, so let's just put in Espanol, call it good. Then 10 episodes led to 17, and then from that, I started to see growth. A little bit here and engagement here. Like, there's something here happening. Let's see what we can do. So later in the following year, I decided to really give it more thought to how I can make everything work and make sense, because as you all know, creating content takes a lot of time. So just double that into like a secondary content in a different language. So I wanted to make sure that I was creating content that was serving my audience, but it was also serving my business, because I run this marketing agency, and I want to make sure that all the content that I'm sharing, it really points back to my business, to my services or my products. Again, thinking of that business mindset, but also really enjoy the whole process of creating content. I'm a creator, I'm an artsy person. I want to have fun with all of this. And then later on, that resulted in more opportunities to grow my business and more partnerships like the one we said with Osha. Eventually, because of that OSHA collaboration, somebody in Canada watched it, started following me, and she followed my Spanish podcast, and she said, hey, I would like for you to audit my French podcast. I'm like, okay, bien sûr, we can, let's do this. And that is one of the ways that I last year grew my business 26% because I started doing this multilingual content, and I started tapping into my why, into like really my authenticity, like my story, and being able to help others do the same. Granted, there's a lot of experimentation when you're doing this content. I mean, we're already experimenting a lot just with one podcast. Oh, do we do series? Do we do seasonal? How long are we doing this? Are we going to video? We're going to audio, all that stuff. So I think going into multilingual content or going into anything in podcasting, you really want to be clear on your why. And you want to make sure that you are okay and open to testing out and realizing that results may or may not come about really quickly. Last year, my business grew 26%, but I had started my podcast in Spanish mid-2022. So that's 2.5 years. So it may take time. It may not take time as much for you, but just be open to that one.
So let's.
How do we do this?
Okay, we're just going into the practical stuff, right?
Yeah.
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 Okay. All right, everyone. So now it's time. Take out the phones. Take all the screenshots. All the things. So now basically we're looking at how do we actually do this, right? And so again, big fan, low effort. Let's test things. If that works, fantastic, amazing. So as I said, podcast guesting in other languages. I mean, you show up for an hour, someone else does the production, someone else is paying for the production, someone else is distributing it. But remember to promote your podcast at the end of it, okay? Like so many people say, like, thank you very much, goodbye. Remember to bring people along. And then signals on other on other platforms, the website footer. Again, you do it once, you don't do it again. Newsletters, your contact forms, and social media profiles. Something we did not actually mention here, and I was thinking earlier, your show notes. Mention that, right? As we've seen on the OSHA, like everything is keywords and everything is metadata that we want to bring people along. And then, you wanted to add something? Okay. And then YouTube auto dubbing, whenever that is available for everyone, because we know it's coming, it's going to be available and it's going to be great. One of my followers, she's based in South Korea. I met her. She mainly consumes my content through reading, and on Instagram, everything that is written, she will like tap that translator. When my content is available in South Korean, she already told me she's going to be listening. So whether that's my voice, actually, that's something that I don't know if it's going to be kind of like cloning your voice or if it's
AI generated.
Yeah, or AI generated. We don't know, but still a great opportunity to do nothing, and it's there. So that will be amazing. And then create seasonal content for your second language. That's exactly what Yesenia does. She's now doing in between seasons. She's doing the English podcast. Then she stops and moves into the Spanish. So really pay attention to burnout is really, really important. And then anything else you wanted to add?
No, let's take it up a notch a little bit. And then let's talk about the medium effort. So some of the things that you can start doing is creating bilingual captions. Applications like Adobe Premiere, CapCut, or Opus Clips, they can allow you to create captions and to languages where you would have maybe your videos in English and you want to have the main caption in English larger and then the second language, let's say Spanish, slightly smaller underneath it. You can even do having a web translator plugin onto your website. Now, you definitely need to do a little bit of research in this regard. Some of them might be based on the amount of words that your website has. Some might be requiring you a one-time fee or a recurring monthly fee subscription. So definitely do some research on that. In my case, I have one website, mainly in English, and I do have a section in Spanish where I share tools and resources. I talk about my services. I have my podcast show notes, so it's all there. You can also offer downloadable transcripts in both languages. If you use an application like, for example, Riverside, I love using Riverside for my podcast, it will already give you a transcript. Then download it, take it to ChatGPT, and ask it to translate in that language. If you feel comfortable reviewing and proofing it, do that, perfect. If you don't feel super comfortable, maybe have somebody take a look at it to make sure that the content is correct. You can even do newsletters in 2 languages. That's what I do. I have one in English and one in Spanish. And you can even create bilingual resources and or products that could lead to monetization. So one thing is that when we think of monetization, like how do we monetize our podcast? We think that the only way is we need 10,000 downloads and we need a ton of subscribers on YouTube and all that. And that is the only single way that we can monetize. And that is not correct. You can monetize in multiple ways, but you definitely need to have a monetization plan from day one.
And one thing that I want to add to that is, for instance, I speak Spanish because I grew up watching Spanish TV. Do not ask me to write. I could not. So having ChatGPT now, if you want to monetize, it's totally tap into those bilingual products. You can. So it's an incredible amount of opportunities that you really don't need to limit yourself. So just consider that.
And then once you're ready to take it up a notch a little bit more, then you can do full-on native language bilingual content, multilingual content. That's what I do. I have a dedicated hosting feed for my English podcasts and a dedicated one for my Spanish podcast. Same for my YouTube channel. At the beginning, I thought of putting everything together. I'm like, do I really want to? And I decided, let me do this the right way because I didn't want to mix up the SEO and the key terms and the search term. And I didn't want anyone in my English-speaking audience who came across a video and then it resulted in Spanish and they didn't want to see that. So I didn't want to hurt my own content. So I know it's a little bit of extra work, but definitely I've seen the results of that. And then another option could be to have dedicated websites for each language. You can even do dubbing overlay over original content, which is what I used to do when I first started doing my own content. I dubbed it myself, and if you feel comfortable, you can do that, or you can hire that out and have somebody dub it in that second language. Or you can even create audio-only content for your secondary language. So maybe let's say you've already moved into video for your main podcast, then a really great way to tap into this new language could be creating audio-only. We know that audio only is a lot simpler to produce than video, so this is a much simpler way to get into multilingual content creation. And then the other option is to using AI software to dub your content. Really, this is a lot of testing and experimentation. What do you like best as the content creator? What makes more sense in your workflow? And how does your audience react? Does your audience prefer, or is your audience okay listening to, let's say, a video in English, but audio dubbed in AI, or audio dubbed by you or by another human? Or are they okay with just subtitles? Really ask your audience. Really use it. I'm on YouTube a lot, so I use the community, the post section, ask, what do you want? And that really gives me an insight of how I can better serve my audience and create content and make my job a lot easier and fun.
Yeah, and I want to tap into that because, again, these conversations with listeners, sometimes we really build it up in our heads and we forget that they're just people and they really want our insights. And so sending a DM to someone who consistently messages or engages with your content can mean the world. And for instance, one of my followers, she's Portuguese, her English wasn't great, and she's like, watching your show on YouTube helps me understand better English and follow along better because I can read your lips. And so that's one of the things that I would not have known. And multiple people say this because they're like, oh, I'm not very confident with my English yet. So even there's a way to further that relationship with your listeners when you really have these conversations and meet them where they are and understand what they need. So is that it?
Absolutely. Yeah, just be open to testing out and have fun doing so. You can scan these QR codes if you want to follow either of us, or check out our website.
Yeah. And we do have time for questions. We have about 5 minutes, I believe. So any questions? Oh, we have one.
We have a question.
Hi, first of all, great panel. Oh, I have to hear myself speaking. Okay, great. So I am originally from Taiwan, so I relate a lot with what you say, from like not speaking English to now like living here and having a whole new experience. And my question is, you talked about doing mini series for one of the languages, but I wonder like if you want to like keep producing for both languages or multi languages, do you do like, I don't know, I have this perfect idea of like making series and contents and websites specific to the needs of each audience. So how do you balance that? Like, do you feel like when you're translating things from Portuguese to English, it loses some relatability?
I think that's important. Well, Yesenia has more experience on that, but when I advise clients, normally we really look at the capacity and we look at what is good enough and what's like the dream, right? And so we try to build up so that we get to that ideal like situation. But sometimes my clients have someone from the language that they're trying to reach to have like, maybe they just some people don't like to trust all the way AI because it's still not perfect, right? But it's really trying to figure out, okay, if you need to tap into one professional to really make sure that you have an advisor or whatever it is that you're trying to understand that, okay, I am not missing the mark. I think that's really important. And it can be that, that you're investing having that meeting initially to understand those needs. For me personally, I try to stay connected and follow trends, what's going on already, so that when it's time to like tap into that market, I've already done kind of like research and it feels like more natural. So I think that's kind of like my strategy.
For me, it's really about checking what is realistically viable for me to produce this year, this quarter. I have a small production agency, and that's very intentional in the way that I've built my business. So I want to make sure that I have the capacity to serve my clients, but also find the joy in creating content. So for me at the moment, even though I would love to create weekly content in English and in Spanish and a lot more other things, I think what's more viable for me is rotating through seasons in language. That way we'll keep it, I can still make sure that I'm creating content of value, and then I'm still present on social media. So even though I have a YouTube channel and a podcast feed dedicated for each of the languages, my Instagram account is my umbrella. I have everything in every language there. So that at least makes it a lot easier for me to manage. And yeah, that's pretty much like making sure that you have the realistic bandwidth to manage that.
I actually have a follow-up question for Yesenia. You mentioned a lot about business goals and aligning with it. So I was wondering if you offer both audiences the same services, or is it slightly different?
So at the current time, one of the things that I do is whenever I'm hiring out somebody, I want to make sure that they also have the capability to manage either English or Spanish. Currently, right now, I have the team, definitely.
Oh my gosh.
So right now I have an editor that works with me in English and Spanish. So right now I'm only able to offer podcast production in English and Spanish. However, I do have bandwidth and the opportunity to offer the audits in Spanish, English, French, and Italian if somebody wanted to do it in Italian.
Okay, thank you so much. And I would love to stay connected afterwards. I will send both of you an email.
I have a twofold question. So the first one is about folks that don't speak any other language, but they also want to tap into different markets. What are your thoughts about these folks using products like 11 Labs so they can actually create a second segment of their show in a different language and try to tap into that market? So that's the first part of the question. The second part of the question is, and should they create, basically duplicate their business in that language, meaning having different Instagram accounts, having different websites, and all of those things in a different language?
So I have multiple, I offer several services, and I offer them in English and in Spanish. Based on my bandwidth, right now I can do certain services in English and in Spanish only, and others English, Spanish, French, and Italian. However, I do also have clients that create content in two languages, English and Spanish, and it really comes down to who is the main audience for them. And then how can they continue creating content on that main language? I think identifying the main language is going to be very helpful as you're starting out and building it out, because it does take a lot of time. the same way that even just one podcast does. And then from there, seeing how you can little by little start adding things. Maybe in this particular client, she has all of her programming in Spanish, and then she started adding some minor programming in English. And then we started adding more bilingual social media posts. And then she started adding like once in a while time bonus content in English, which is her second language for her content. So really tap into who is your main audience right now, and then what do you, if there are any crossovers between that new audience that you want to reach in the new language, and see how that could probably help you bridge that gap and make it easy for you to produce content and serve that audience.
All right, and I do think that's a really interesting question about AI. I would say definitely important to what Yesenia, a double on that. Why are you doing it? Are you getting FOMO, or is there an actual business decision? Because everything is an investment in time, resources, all the things. So is it a nice to have? Is it a must have? And I agree with testing one market first and then having those conversations. Doesn't make sense to move forward. When we're looking at using 11 Labs, I think that for me, I always talk about like being an ethical creator. I think that is really important that you say, hey, this content is created using AI. Because we're breaking the trust with our audience. Because imagine going to a conference meeting or like a meetup or having a client meeting and they go, oh yeah, like you speak this language. And you're like, no, right? That trust is broken right away. So we don't want that to happen, but I definitely think that it's important to tap into that if you can. And if you're like, yes, we have to go into both markets, kind of incrementally, like definitely snag all the handles on all websites, right? You can, just to make sure that nobody takes that. But then just actually direct them, say, hey, TBD, in the meantime, follow us here. So you're cross-promoting those two channels. But I think 11 Labs is going to be incredible. I know that a lot of creators already who are very time constrained, they do have one main language being that language they speak, and then having that secondary language. Or this is something that I've done in the past, which is you invite a guest to host your podcast. Whether you have a business and it's your core partner, or you actually hire someone because they have the expertise and they speak that language, they can host the show for you. They're the talent. Right? So you don't physically need to do all the things, but you can manage that side of like the benefits of having a podcast in a secondary language. And then you don't need to worry about, is this cultural relevant or not? So I think that is like something to consider. I think
we are.
Oh, we have another one. Yes.
Oh, okay.
This is really quick. In United States, there is a lot of media using bilingual on the same show. It's Spanish, English. What do you think about it, to use it in the podcast?
Spanglish?
Spanglish, yes.
I love the question we had. We were discussing that the other day. I think it goes back to depending on who is your audience. Last year I was doing a workshop for a university in Puerto Rico about podcasting, and we came across this Spanglish podcast about true crime. It was very interesting. But when I presented it to the group, they were like, "Well, that was in Spanglish, and that means that the way that they were presenting it, you need to learn both. You need to understand both English and Spanish in that particular example." So I think it goes back to knowing who your audience is and knowing that depending on how you're using Spanglish, whether it's just to add, let's say, mainly English and add a couple of words in Spanish or vice versa, or if you're going to go full on with trains of thought in either language and switching from one to the other, then that makes that puts you in a place where you want to make sure that your audience understands fluently or to some degree both languages so that they can follow along without any difficulty. And I think if you do the Spanglish, I think that's where the transcripts would be really beneficial. So if maybe somebody that's learning English or learning Spanish, and then you can have the transcript available, that would make it a lot easier to follow along.
Hey guys, thank you for the topic today. How do you guys keep your authenticity when you're speaking in another language? And also, when you are speaking in another language, doing a podcast, are you afraid when you are talking because maybe your English or your Portuguese or French is not good enough?
Yeah, I can take that for a quick second. So actually, it's really important that you own it. And I love that question because I've left Portugal in 2011. And so I don't consume as much Portuguese content anymore. And so when I am doing recordings with Portuguese creators, I will sometimes say, hey, sometimes I have to insert an English term. And they're like, yeah, fine. And I actually know from knowing the market that in Portugal, it's actually quite trendy. People slap in like an English word, absolutely unnecessary, just because to sound fancy. So I know that I'm protected. That's fine. But I own it, and I laugh about it, and it's fine. And we actually just recorded a podcast episode in Spanish with Tropical Podcasting over there with Julio, and we did it all in Spanish. And we were like, yeah, if you need to slap some English there, that's fine. And we ended up not needing really too much, but I think that when you own it, the audience is okay with it. But again, it goes back to having that conversation with your audience and that expectation. In the beginning, I felt really stressed out because I was like, oh no, but I want to say it. Like my perfectionist, I need to go and do it just in Spanish, just in Portuguese. But then I was like, you know what? That's not how we talk. So that helps.
Yeah, own it and be okay making a mistake. If you're in the process of learning a language, that's actually how you learn. It's by making the mistake. Have fun with it, and yeah, just own it. And it's your superpower.
Thank you. And we still have time for questions. Our next session was canceled, so we have room for another question.
Well, mine will be a comment more than anything else. Just thank you so much, mujeres, for being here. Just having powerful, strong women that are doing the dang thing is amazing. As a mujer who is Mexicana, from Mexico, came out here. But I came out here when I was 1 year old. I do want to just encourage all of us in the room, especially those that speak Spanish and know your facts and know your data. That is really going to help you be more encouraged when we realize in the United States by the year 2030, 1 in 6 of us will be 2030. 1 in 6 of us, yes, will be Latina. Excuse me, 1 in 3 of us. Gosh, this data. Yes, let me go back. Let's start over for those of you that would like to take a video. Just kidding. Listen, this is about owning it. So by the way, let me own this. I had a brain tumor a long time ago, and so sometimes when las cosas se me atrapan en la cabeza, when things get trapped in here, I go, oh, it was a brain tumor. Okay, not really, it's just me. So by 2030, 1 in 6 will be Spanish, speaking Latina. By 2060, 1 in 3. So it is literally, hi, hola. Who is your Latina? Who is the person standing next to you, right? So when it comes to ads, know that the money, the power is in us. So I do have a question. How have you leaned into that data? I'm sure you all are very knowledgeable and you are into your analytics. Have you been able to tap into that, and how receptive have brands been to you in your Latinidad, in whether it's French or Spanish? How have they been receptive? Where have you seen any challenges so that you can, as you are forefronters and pioneers in all of this, help us to tap into those dollars?
Do you want to take that one?
So, thank you for the question. In my case, it's been really a slow process because one, it's part of me being okay with how am I doing this? How am I approaching it? So me being clear on my why, because if I have that, then I'm going to pitch it. I want to pitch that. So I need to make sure that I have that. I'm starting from a good point of view, standpoint. And then when I approach it, so far, it's been really positive. I've done other collaborations with Riverside, for example, where they were very excited about creating content for Spanish, in Spanish. So, and then in this case, Osha was in French. So I think it's one, doing the research of what brands, where do you see an opportunity where you could probably potentially pitch yourself to do a collaboration, and then go at it little by little to see how you can, how it's back connected to your business. I believe that I want to make sure that I'm partnering with the right people, not with everybody, to make sure that it makes sense for my business and it also brings value to my audience.
And maturity. Sometimes you're being a leader and you're a visionary and the brand is not ready for you. But that's why it's important to build relationships with brands and to be there, not only be the first one, but be the one that consistently shows up, gives them the data. Again, we can tell a story. And if you tell a story that this is why it makes sense, again, data is our best friend. It's not like kind of like up in the air. And so that is important, but also just remembering that some brands are not ready for that yet. So keep that going. Be the advocate. I've had a lot of brand partnerships as opportunities because I was always there. I was like, hey guys, like I have some ideas. Here's what we can do, and here's what it will do. So really keep that in mind always. I think that's really important.
We're sorry, that was our last question, but feel free to catch the speakers after they come off the stage. Thank you guys so much for coming. Thank you.